Let us not forget everything that happens is by the will of Allah. It's time to unite and stand, and we will be the best amongst men. It's not time to be extreme or do you think about, but to stand together as one. To Sunnah followers streaming every day, various platforms. Trust me, you'll find a way. Sunnah followers.
Mention her name and the name of some other eminent companions comes up. The name Umar, radiallahu anha. The name Saeed, radiallahu anha. And also the surah Taha also comes to mind. Join Ustada lailanasheeba as she details the story of Faatimah Bint Al Khattab, the sister of Umar. Alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam Allah, wa rasulullah. Welcome to our series that's become such a talked about series. Our series on the heroines of Islam. And mashallah, today, for today's episode, I have a great heroine to speak about. And speaking about her, whenever her name is mentioned, we can't help but mention the name of her brother. Her brother was none other than Umar bin Al Khattab, Umar, who became the second caliph of the Muslims. Umar, radiallahu anha, who will be the second person to enter paradise after the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because she was the tool used by Allah to bring Umar into the folds of Islam. So let's go over the wonderful story of this female companion. And what was her name? Her name was Faatimah, the daughter of Al Khattab. And let me put, I know you guys like to make, screenshot everything. So I'm going to take everything else down. And, hold on. For the people here in try to share you guys. Yeah, the people on Zoom to my people on Instagram. So the people on Zoom, inshallah, I'm going to share you all with this is the wrong Instagram page. Oh, wait a minute. Let me Okay, there it is. Okay, let me make it big screen here. Hold on here. Yeah. Okay. And okay, I got that set up. All right, now let me take us all to my PowerPoint, inshallah. All right, now let's make this big screen. Okay, inshallah, everybody can see. So tonight's story is going to basically tell the story of a couple of other companions as well. Not only the story of Faatimah, the daughter of Al Khattab, but also the story of her brother and his conversion, and also the story of her husband, and also the story of a man who our prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned and other hadiths. And we're going to come upon those hadiths tonight. And her name was Faatimah, the daughter of Al Khattab. She tells us in her own words that she heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, "My nation will continue to be blessed as long as the love of this world does not prevail amongst them, and as long as there is no prevalence of corrupt scholars and ignorant reciters of the Quran and tyrants. If all of these things exist, then I fear that Allah may include all the people in his punishment." This hadith is authentic. This hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. And can y'all see? The Prophet is talking about us. A lot of you Muslims ask, why? Why is Allah allowing what's happening in Gaza to happen? Why is Allah allowing? We never ask why Allah allows anything. But I want y'all to pay attention to these words that Faatimah narrated to us. The Prophet said, "My nation will continue to be blessed as long as they don't fall for the love of this world." We've fallen for the love of this world. He said also, as long as there are no corrupt scholars. What scholars? Most of the men pretending to be scholars today are corrupt. 97% of the men and women that you all think are scholars are nothing but beggars. In it for the fame. They issue fatwas that go against what Allah says, that go against what the Prophet said. I keep telling y'all, the true scholars of this nation are few. There's only a handful. And also he said, when the people who recite the Quran are ignorant, that means that they memorized it and they can recite it, but they don't know what they're saying. Isn't that most reciters today? People are learning how to recite the Quran as children, but ask them what they're saying. They don't know. They don't know. I just was beaten and taught to recite. And look at the Muslim lands. The Muslim lands are all run by tyrants. Well, the Prophet said, when this happens, that's when Allah will include everybody in his punishment, the good and the bad. So that's why Gaza is happening. That's why Sudan is happening. That's why China is happening, because these are the days that our prophet said would happen. We've succumbed to the life of this world. We're ignorant of our religion. We don't know the meaning of the Quran. We don't even know the hadiths. We got men and women that we've made scholars who are ignorant. All they're looking for is money and fame. And they're issuing all kind of fatwas that go against Islam, making things haram, like beauty and makeup that Allah didn't make haram. So don't ever ask why Allah does what he does. Look around you. Look at the Muslims around you. Look at yourself. That's why. Everybody understand? Well, this hadith came from Faatimah, radiyallahu anha, the daughter of Al Khattab. Her brother was Umar, and Umar was the second caliph of Islam. And one of the good things about Faatimah Bint Al Khattab is that whenever her name is mentioned, you have to mention the story of her brother too. Whenever her name is mentioned, you have to talk about her husband. Who was her husband? Her husband was Sa'id ibn Zayd. Sa'id ibn Zayd. He was a great companion. He was one of the 10 given the good news of paradise in that hadith. And also, whenever you hear her name mentioned, you reflect upon Surah Taha, because Taha, that's the surah that brought her brother about. So to mention her name brings into existence and reminder many things, guys, many things. That's how great this woman was. And it is due to the grace and mercy of Allah that because of her, her brother Umar became one of the great ones of this nation. And also through the supplication of the Prophet Muhammad, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua, asking Allah to strengthen Islam by either bringing to it Umar, the son of Khattab, or Umar, the son of Hisham. Okay? So Allah brought Umar into Islam through that supplication and through the tool of his sister, Faatimah, radiallahu anha. Okay? And to properly understand her role around the Prophet, we have to backtrack and talk about, her home. First of all, there was a man named Zayd ibn Amir ibn Nufail. This man was the father of Fatima's husband, Saeed. And we've talked about this man before. During the pre-Islamic era, remember, he did not follow the way of the Quraysh. He was one of the few Arabs that stayed upon the religion of Ishmael, the religion of Abraham. Remember, the Quraysh, they knew about Allah because Allah sent to them Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ishmael to convey the message to them. The Prophet Muhammad's mother and father, they're kafir. They will be in hell forever because they chose to worship idols instead of stick to the way of Prophet Abraham. Well, Amir ibn Nufail was not like them. He used to stand outside the Kaaba and he used to remind the Muslims, that there's only one Allah and that he's the only one worthy of worship. But the Quraysh would ridicule him. They would ignore him. In fact, we went over the hadith from Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr. She talks about how when she was a little girl, she remembers seeing Zayd ibn Amir ibn Nufail reclining on his back, leaning against the Kaaba. And he would say, "O Quraysh, by he in whose hand is my soul, no one from amongst you is upon the religion of Ibrahim but me." And also we have many authentic hadiths that speak about how Zayd would also speak out against them burying their daughters, because the Arabs, just like the Vikings and Romans, they would bury their female babies. And what he would do is run and try to stop the men from doing that. He said, "I'll pay for her. Don't bury her. I'll raise her myself, and I'll even give her back to you when she's grown." Okay, so Amir ibn Nufail, he was one of the few messengers. And when I say messenger, I don't mean prophet. Remember, Allah says that he sends messengers. Messengers are not all prophets. There will be no prophet after the Prophet Muhammad. But Ibn Nufail was a messenger, just like I am a messenger, just like Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid is a messenger, just like all of us Dr. Dramali is a messenger. We're not messengers of Allah. We're just callers to the truth, because that's what a messenger is. Someone who conveys the message of the truth to the people. And that's why when each and every one of us dies and the angels pull our soul from our throat, they will say to us, didn't Allah send messengers to remind you? And you can't say they didn't, because they're going to start telling you, didn't lailanasheeba talk about this? Didn't Kareem Abu Zaid speak about this? Didn't Sheikh Muhammad Saeed Atlee put out books that you bought and never read? So Allah always has messengers that the people, amongst the people, to call them to the truth, although they're not prophets of Allah. Okay? So Amir ibn Nufail was a daya. He was a messenger, just like me, like I am today, and Kareem and all the rest of us. You know, he would sit outside the Kaaba trying to call the people back to La ilaha illallah. But just like people today don't listen to us, they didn't listen to him. We also have, and these are all authentic hadiths. All of these hadiths I got straight from out of Bukhari, most of them, but there are some from Muwatta and some from Muslim too. Okay, we have this hadith, whereas Zayd ibn Amir, frustrated that the people weren't listening to him, he went to Syria. He traveled to Syria asking about the true religion to see, you know, what the people were upon there. The Jews and the Christians told him that their religion, that the true religion is the religion of Ibrahim. And at that time, Zayd was not a Jew, nor was he a Christian. He held up his hand and said, "Oh Allah, I make you my witness that I am upon the religion of Ibrahim. These people are not." Okay. Also the hadith, whereas a Jew told him, do not follow our religion unless you have a share of Allah's punishment. And the Christians told him, do not follow our religion or you will have a share of Allah's curse. And we have another companion who says, I met Zayd ibn Amir when he was outside Mecca heading towards this town of Hira. And he said, Amir, I have parted ways with my people and I'm following the religion of Abraham and Ismail. Abraham, he used to pray facing the Kaaba. And I am expecting a prophet from the descendants of Ismail and from the descendants of Abdul Muttalib. And I do not think that I will remain alive till he comes. So all of this is narrated in the authentic hadiths about Amir ibn Nufail. And remember, the prophet spoke about him and said he was upon the true religion. And he tried his best to call the Quraysh back to it, but they wouldn't listen. We also have this hadith from Amir ibn Rabia. He said, when I embraced Islam, I conveyed his greeting to the prophet, and he returned the greeting and invoked the Lord to bless him and said, I saw him in paradise dragging his coattails. Talking about Amir ibn Nufail. And remember, we talked about this before. When the prophet went on his night journey and he was allowed to see different things in paradise, he saw Ibn Nufail in paradise dragging his coattails. Remember that hadith? Well, this is the same person we're speaking about. You know, he was the father. He was the father of Fatima's husband, Saeed. Also, we have this on the authority of Ibn Umar, the son of Umar. He said that Saeed and Umar asked the prophet as to whether it was permissible to ask Allah for forgiveness for Zayd ibn Amir. And of course, the prophet said yes, because he was Muslim. So all of these hadiths, you know, speak about, you know, how great a man Fatima's husband, Saeed's father was. So just so you guys know, Umar's sister was married to the son of Amir ibn Nufail, the one who the prophet said he saw dragging his coats in paradise. And also where the prophet said we can make dua for any Muslim who has died, but not for any kafir. All right. So Sa'id ibn Zayd, he was raised upon Islam. So when the Prophet Muhammad announced his prophethood, it was only logical that Sa'id would embrace. Sa'id became one of the first people to accept the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet. Okay, so that was her husband. That was the brother-in-law of Umar. And it is from this that we're going to begin our story about her. When Sa'id heard about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam announcing his prophethood, he was one of the first 10 to embrace Islam after Abu Bakr. And Faatimah, the sister of Umar, she too had a good heart, and she never worshiped idols either. So she had married Sa'id before the Prophet Muhammad announced his belief, and she lived just like her husband, worshiping Allah. Umar's sister never worshiped idols. Just like Khadija radiallahu anha never worshiped idols. Just like Abu Bakr never worshiped idols. Okay? Her and Sa'id married because they both had that in common, and they lived together, you know, in their home. And they tried to raise their children with not worshiping the idols either. So, of course, when the Prophet Muhammad arrived and mentioned prophethood, her and him, they were the first of the first to embrace Islam. Okay? But they kept it hidden, just like all the Muslims did back in those days. Remember, in the beginning of Islam, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca, the Muslim people had to hide their belief, because if the Quraysh found out that you were Muslim, they would persecute you, kill you even. So Sa'id and his wife Faatimah, they kept it hidden. And also because of Umar. Umar was Faatimah's brother. He was a leader amongst the Quraysh, and Umar used to punish the Muslims badly. Okay? But then something great happened. The Prophet Muhammad's uncle Hamza had arrived in Mecca from Syria. And when he arrived, he announced to the people of Mecca that he too had accepted Islam. And when the Quraysh and people of Mecca heard that, they were kind of terrified, because Hamza was a great warrior and a great chief leader amongst them. Well, Umar radiallahu anha, he became Muslim, most historians believe, 3 days after Hamza. They say that this was right after the Prophet, when the Prophet had made dua asking Allah to either guide Abu Jahl or Umar. Hamza came in town, was Muslim, and 3 days after that, Allah sent Umar. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how this happened. Well, one day, Umar was sitting in the company of some Qurayshi men. They were all talking about Hamza. They were discussing how could Hamza abandon the religion of his forefathers and take on this religion of Muhammad's. So they were talking about this, and they were talking about how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was bringing a lot of dissension amongst the Quraysh. Umar got angry. He said, who does this man Muhammad think he is anyway? He said, I'm going to end this. He said, I'm going to go and kill him. I'm going to put all this to the end. I'm going to kill him and stop all this nonsense. So Umar got up and left. He grabbed his sword, his knife, and he set out to find the prophet so he could kill him. But on his way, a man stopped him, and a man said, where you going? Umar said, I'm going to find Muhammad ibn Abdullah. I'm going to kill him, and I'm going to free all the Arabs from his trials. Because again, they could not understand why Hamza had abandoned the religion of his father. So the man looked at Umar. He said, do you think that the clan of Abdul al-Manaf are going to leave you alone if you kill him? You need to put your own house in order first, Umar. And Umar said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And the man said, don't you know your sister and your brother-in-law, Saeed? They have been following the Prophet Muhammad since he announced his prophethood. They are secret Muslims, your own sister and your own brother-in-law. When Umar heard this, he became angry. He said, I'm going to deal with this. So he changed his direction and went to the house of his sister carrying his sword. And he was raging mad like a bull. You know, Umar was known for his bad temper. That's the same temper that his daughter Hafsa inherited. So anyway, when Umar arrived at the home of his sister and brother-in-law, he stood outside their house. And he could hear some whispering, but he couldn't understand what they were saying. So he began to bang on the door, and he began to shout for them to come to the door. When they heard his voice and they heard his banging, they knew he was angry. You know, everybody knew of Umar's temper. So Umar's sister, she ran in the corner of the house and she hid. She hid the script of the Quran, because that's what they were doing. Her and her husband were reading the Quran together. Remember, Umar, radiallahu anhu, was one of the few Arabs that knew how to read and write. Not only did he know how to read and write, but his sister knew how to read and write, and also all his children. Ibn Umar knew how to read and write. Hafsa was the only wife of the Prophet. Not even Aisha knew how to read and write, but Hafsa did. She learned it from her father. And so Umar's sister Faatimah knew how to read too. And that's what she and her husband were doing. They were reading the Quran. And so when she heard her brother screaming and shouting at the door, she hid it. Okay? She hid it. And then they let him in. They let him in the house because they knew if they didn't, he was going to break it in. And when she opened the door, he asked, what was this murmuring I heard you say? And they both said, we weren't murmuring, we weren't whispering, we weren't doing anything. We're just enjoying our home. And then Umar began to yell at them. And he told them, I'm not crazy. Either tell me what you were reading or I'm going to get angry. And that's when Faatimah confronted her brother. And she said, okay. She said, I was reading the Quran. She said, and I testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. And as soon as she said that, Umar ran to her husband, Saeed, threw him on the floor and began beating him. He was going to kill him. Faatimah ran to defend her husband, And Umar slapped her to get her out the way. He slapped her so hard that her face began to bleed. And it was when he saw the blood on his sister's face that he realized he had done something really bad, because despite his anger, he loved his sister. Umar was close to his sister. So he stopped and he picked her husband up off the floor. And then he went over to his sister and began to wipe the blood off her face. And then he calmed down and he said to Saeed, he said, tell me, what was it that you two were saying? And that's when his sister went and got the script that she had hid. And it was the beginning of Surah Taha. So that's why whenever we mention her name, we think about Taha, because that's the surah she and her husband were reciting when Umar heard them. So Umar asked her, he said, can I see it? Can I read it for myself? At first she said no. She said, because she didn't know if he was serious. But when she looked in his eyes and saw that he was serious, she told him to go clean yourself first. She said, in order to read the book of Allah, you have to be in a state of purity. So he went and washed his face and washed his hands and washed the blood off of him and the dust off his arms, as she told him to do. And then he came back to her and she allowed him to read. And so he read the first verses of Taha, and that's when it moved. It moved his heart. That's when Umar's heart was moved. He recognized the truth, that these were the words of Allah, that these were not the words of a madman, that these were not words written by any human being. And after reading those verses, he asked his sister, where is Muhammad? And again, she and her husband were afraid to tell him. But again, he said, please tell me, I'm not going to hurt him. He said, I'm not going to hurt him. I need to meet with him. I feel pulled and drawn towards him. So again, Faatimah looked in her brother's eyes, and she was able to recognize that he was truthful. So she and her husband told him that the Prophet Muhammad was at the house of Arqam. That's where the Prophet would meet with his followers to teach them the Quran and stuff. Okay. And that's when Umar decided, well, take me to him. I want to go see him. And that's when he was told, rejoice, O Umar, you have been blessed with the Prophet's supplication. He made supplication a few days ago. He said, I heard him making supplication a few days ago, asking Allah to strengthen Islam by either bringing you into it or Abu Jahl, whichever one was better. And that made Umar happy. He said, really? He said, yes. And it seems Allah chose you over Abu Jahl. And that did something to Umar. He said, I'm better than Abu Jahl? And that's when Umar said, take me to Muhammad. Please take me to him. And that's when they did. Okay. Umar left the house of, he left for the house of Arqam. And he arrived at the house of Arqam. And when the companions saw him coming, they became terrified and worried because, again, Umar was known for being abusive, just like Abu Jahl. They were horrible towards the Muslims. So when the companions saw him coming, they were confused and scared and said, oh, Prophet, it's the son of Al Khattab. But the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew that this was Allah answering his supplication. And that's when the prophet told them, let him through. Let him through. As Allah says in the Quran, and the interpretation of the meaning, when my servants ask you, Muhammad, about me, tell them I am close to them with my knowledge, and I respond to the invocations of the person that calls upon me. So let them obey me and believe in me. So the prophet knew that this was Allah's response to the supplication he had just made 4 days ago. He made that dua 4 days ago. His cousin, his uncle Hamza converted the day after he made it. And 3 days later, here's Umar. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded the door be opened for Umar. And when the door was opened by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet went outside and grabbed Umar and by the collar of his garment and said, "O son of Al Khattab, what are you waiting for? It's about time that you converted to Islam." Subhanallah. And that's when our beloved Umar took his shahada and became Muslim. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. In fact, Umar, with humility and submission, said, "I testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that you, Muhammad, are his true messenger." And all the Muslims there were so happy. They raised their voices in takbir. His sister was happy. Her husband was happy. Umar's father was happy because Umar's father had hid in her house, afraid that his son might kill him. But Umar's father was the one that told him, "I heard the prophet make dua asking Allah to guide either you or Abu Jahl." So Umar's conversion became a victory for the Muslims. Allah strengthened him with Islam, and Allah strengthened Islam with him. And with Umar's acceptance of Islam, the call of Islam came out of secrecy. No longer did the Muslims have to hide in the house of Arqam because Umar dared the Quraysh to do anything to anybody. Allah made a clear distinction between truth and falsehood with him. And that's why anytime we mention Faatimah Bint Al Khattab, this whole story comes up. Because indeed, Allah chose her to be the means by which her brother accepted Islam. And her home became the starting point for this great man's change of heart. And that's the story of Faatimah Al Khattab. And also, guys, she too was given the good news of paradise, just like her husband, just like her brother. Alhamdulillah. So that's the story of Faatimah Al Khattab. And so, as you can see, guys, the thing that I really want all of you to understand, all of you women listening to me, all of you women following me, I want you all to understand that nowhere does Allah say that because we are women that we are inferior. We're not inferior mentally. We're not inferior spiritually. We're equal to men on those levels. Some of us are better than men. All of these female companions are better than any man on this earth. No mufti, no sheikh, no imam holds a candle to Faatimah Al Khattab or any of these women. And I want you sisters to also see, nowhere does Islam say that we are invisible. These women were there from the beginning of Islam, and they will be there to the end. Because if I'm one of them, I'll be right there with the Mahdi, right there with Jesus to the end, until that virus takes the believers out. So nowhere does Allah say that women are not important, that we don't have a role, that we're supposed to be as if we don't exist. Allah didn't make any mistakes in his creation. We are not part of the jinn. We are part of human. We are of mankind. We are of the seen world, not the unseen. The question is, are you going to be remembered for your seen good actions like Faatimah Al Khattab was? Are you going to be remembered for your seen good actions like Salama, Aisha, and all of them were? Will you be remembered like Sulaim, Ammar, and them were for their seen good actions? That's the question. All right, I'm going to stop right here. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.